right, so it being 6:01, we'll call this special meeting of the Brookfield School Committee to order on August 24th, 2026. If you could all please stand and rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we're going to start with agenda item number 1, and I'm going to let Mr. McCormick introduce our guest here.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. So back, I think, sometime in late winter, early spring, the committee at the time had asked for a financial analysis, 5-year financial analysis projections for the district. And so I did some homework, some research, and I came across a group that I had worked with or been to a webinar before. Mr. Mark Abrams and his son Matt Abrams are the president and principal of the Abrams Group, LLC. They present Chapter 70 analysis and financial overlooks for districts and superintendents and business managers across the state. So connected with Mark, and over the last 2-3 months, we've been working together with providing him information to put this presentation together for you all this evening. And this gives you a look at where North Brookfield currently is, where it's been, and also where it's going financially. I'll let Mark and Matt kind of fill in some of the blanks for their bios, but I can tell you that Mark's bio, this is 30 years in the making of this group with this company, and both Mark and Matt have worked with several districts over the last several years in doing similar projects, but also as close in Spencer East Brookfield with their financial oversight the last several years. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening. So, go right into the presentation. There's a growing need to help school districts deal with changing resulting from both enrollment and reduced state fiscal aid. We've seen a foundation enrollment decline of 30% over the last several years. Foundation enrollment means students that live in your district and go to a public school, any public school. They could letting Matt in. They could reside in your district and go to North Brookfield. They could choice out, they could charter out. Any school choice in would not affect foundation enrollment. So one of the key analysis that we've done for Tim is to look at foundation enrollment and also headcount, and we'll be diving into that. So we're basically presenting enrollment and financial data to form a baseline. Then we will look into Chapter 70 and walk you through the Chapter 70 numbers. Then we'll go into projections. So what I'd like to do is suggest we do the presentation of each section and then take questions that you may have for us, as opposed to going through the whole 50 plus slides and then do Q&A. So we'll break this up into 3 sections. Our data is from the district, DESE and DOR websites. The state data may lag 1 to 3 years, and North Brookfield's data are current. And as always, our numbers may be off due to rounding. So let's start first with enrollment. So foundation enrollment. These numbers go back to 1994. So this is a snapshot of the last 23 years or so. And you can see a decline of roughly 30% over these years. Again, these are students that live in your district and go to a public school. And this is through fiscal 25 as budgeted. And the data here is from DESE. Your enrollment numbers are from pre-K to 12. And you can see the numbers here. But on the left side, breaks it down into student populations: high needs, English learners, first language, not English, low income, students with disabilities. And we do this because later we'll be getting into chapter 70, where these numbers are important. You exceed the statewide average for high needs, low income, and students with disability. So these are your numbers here as compared to the Commonwealth statewide numbers. So this looks at enrollment of selected populations in terms of growth since 2022 fiscal year. And you'll see that in each case, your high needs English learners, first language not English, low income, and student with disabilities are either flat or growing. Your budget and your enrollment is heavily influenced by choice. And this chart illustrates school attending students for local public schools have declined by 230 students, or roughly 37%, since 2008, while your out-of-district students have increased by 37%. And the total enrollment in public schools has declined by roughly 19%. And this is through fiscal 25, I believe. This is a snapshot of school choice statewide, where a student coming in or a choice out student has a tuition rate of $5,000. And then some other data here for virtual schools. But for North Brookfield, you are sending more choice students out than you receive. So this chart, the red is sending and the blue is receiving. And you'll see basically, not a steady, but a definite, over the years, incline in school choice out students and a decline in school choice in, although of late, a slight increase. Dollar-wise, you're receiving through fiscal 25 roughly $479,000 in school choice tuition and spending $1,100,000 in choice out payments. For choice, we don't net. We record the revenues in the revenue budget and the choice out expenditures as tuition out in the expenditure budget. This chart shows the tuition out for the roughly 15 districts that you send students. And again, roughly 1.1 million through fiscal 25. So your choice tuition payments out have exceeded tuition receipts by $7.4 million over the years.
Mark, I'm going to stop you for a second. I just thought of something here. So this print on here is really small because we have a small like TV we have this on, and we have a lot of people here in the back. I don't know if there's a way if you can pause a minute. If you guys have a device, I can email it to you guys. I mean, because you guys probably can't see any of this, and I know he's kind of going fast through this.
Will it be available for us to look at later?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I can email it out.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's good? Okay. I just don't, because you're going through it quick and they can't read the actual numbers or figures. So I just wanted to make sure that if you could just make sure you highlight whatever you feel, because they can't see anything back there.
Sure, but you can see the chart.
Correct.
In the chart, the light blue is the tuition out payments, and the darker blue is the tuition in payments, receipts. My point is, for several slides, the school choice out numbers of students and tuition payments far exceeds the school choice in. And so you see, yeah, there's a lot of numbers over here. But look at the trends. Trends are important because we're going to be estimating, projecting school choice going forward. And maybe you could see these numbers a little clearer, they're a little bigger.
Not really.
But your school choice is leveling off around 10 and 11% of your total enrollment. So those numbers came from the state through the DART reports. For 26 and 27, your school choice expenditures exceed your school choice revenues. In 26, 1.1 million out and 668,000 of revenues coming in. 27, 536,000 of revenues coming in, 1.2 million of expenditures going out. So now you've got data going back many years and what your 26 and 27 budgets contain. So key enrollment takeaways, strictly enrollment. The district's foundation enrollment has declined 30% in the last 13 years. And we did a study 5 years ago looking at potential regionalization of you and two other districts, Warren and West Brookfield. At the time, there was a 20% decline in foundation enrollment, and that's now increased to 30%. High needs, first language, not English, low income, and students with disabilities have increased over the last 5 years. And clearly, I think you could see that school choice heavily impacts your budget. Choice payments have exceeded tuition receipts in almost every year, the last by 7.4 million. Tuition receipts have grown since 2021, capping off in the 458,000 range. 26 budget choice tuition payments exceed tuition receipts by about $500,000. In 27, roughly 536,000 school choice revenues, but over 1.2 million in expenditures. And as stated previously, your enrollment, school choice enrollment is about 10%, 11% of your total enrollment. So we'll pause here and see if you have any questions on enrollment.
I have You guys have anything?
You can go ahead. Sorry.
So the one thing that stood out to me, Mark, was on slide 6, just confirming that that's a correct number and not an error that would impact projecting. I think it was slide 6. Yep. So that first number, high needs, that's correct?
Yeah, we've got that from Desi. You'll see it here too on slide 7. 2 different reports.
So that 99.7% of our students are either high needs, low income, or students with disabilities?
Yes,
Okay.
So virtually almost every
That's not
kid.
possible.
I think that there was a reporting error in the sentence.
The low income number was elevated at 1.2, and that comes in around 55%, which is on that slide.
That's the state number.
No, district, the low income number.
this is the state
That's the
number.
state number.
This is your number.
The number percent for the district is 55% for low income. That at one point was incorrectly reported on the state webpage as 99.7 as well. So I'll need to check that high needs number. I don't know if that's accurate. To
I
answer
mean,
your
I would
question.
assume it's not.
Yeah, I don't think it is either, but the low income number is accurate.
Okay. But I thought he was saying that's the percentage, the state's percentage of high needs is 55%.
That's correct.
Okay. So what's our percentage of low income? Is that, you're saying the
Low
41?
income, which is
I
a
got
few
you.
sections down.
I got you.
is
Okay.
just
I'm sorry, the number 55, I thought you were talking about the other number.
So the numbers below the 99.7, are those supposed to add up to 99.7? Because they don't. So
Those are different,
3.1, 4.955, and 3.1.8 does not equal 99.7.
No, those are
Shouldn't
all
shouldn't
different.
equal 100. Yeah.
Those are all different, so like, your number of high needs
Yeah.
students, and then how many overall, out of all of our kids, how many are English learners,
Yeah.
and then out of all of our kids, how many are first language not English. So, out of all of our kids, 99.7 qualify as high needs.
Right, but these numbers here, I'm just doing quick math here. This only comes out, I believe, to 94.5. I could be wrong. Could be wrong on that. So I
Right, but-
question the numbers.
Even if our high needs, percentage was at 55, we could still have our English learners at 3.1%.
Yeah, they're separate.
If I can just clarify,
Okay.
your high needs population are members of one of 3 different subgroups: disabled, low income, or EL. The number being 55%, if you add in any students who are disabled but not low income, or EL but not low income, it will increase the high needs number by the 55 because it's in addition to. But will it be 99.7? No. For the purposes of the presentation, I think Mr. Abrams will say that the low-income population does directly impact the amount of Chapter 70 funding
Yeah.
that the
That
district
number has
receives.
gone up over the last year, so that puts us in the bracket, which is back our Chapter 70 funding. Those 3 numbers which drive the high needs are obviously less than 99%. I think, just doing quick math, it's right around 90%. But I think the one that is grayed out there that I think is the most important to that calculation is the low income number.
Did you have any other
We'll
questions?
revisit the low income when we get to chapter 70.
Any other questions on the enrollment slides?
Not at this time.
So I did have one question, Mark. So I know you did mention that we used a mix of DESI numbers and numbers right from the central office. But it kind of appears that we went back and forth between, like, so we used some numbers from, you know, because I know a lot of the state numbers we don't have after 2025, but then we use some district numbers after 25 and not, like, why didn't we just go back and use the district numbers for those for the state ones that we only had till 25? I don't know if I asked that in a way that you can
State
digest.
numbers are easier to, the state numbers are what the district reports to the state, compiled by the state, vetted by the state. They are much easier to access. They're in both table and chart formats for presentation purposes. 26 and 27 are not on the state, obviously, because the end of the year reports haven't been published by the state on their website.
Okay, I just noticed that you had referenced like some new numbers that we gave to you from the district, but then we're going back to 25 on some other categories. So I just figured that might sway the projections a little bit if we're using two different standards, or no?
Well, we'll get to projections.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
6-year averages.
Okay.
Matt, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Hey, Mark, I just have a question in looking at the school choice out. We have our actual for FY '26, and I don't believe that comes on the end of the year report. And our actual assessments was $1,390,000. It's a difference of about $90,000. How will that affect any of the information you provided?
For what fiscal year?
FY '26? You had 1.299.
Yeah, that came, that came from the district. So you're saying this number should be 1.3?
Yeah, 1.390097.
We could check with Danielle.
Any other questions? I think we can move on, Mark, to the next section.
Okay, finances. Again, a lot of data coming from the state through their DART reports. The profile summarizes Chapter 70 going back to 1993. Key factors, trends those numbers starting in 2007. And the budget data has come from the district. So another state report on per pupil spending. This one, the latest was 24. And you'll see in district FTEs, per pupil spending, and spending compared to the state. And you'll see that North Brookfield's per pupil spending is less than the statewide average for the years reported here. And then this is broken down 22, 23, and 24 in district, out of district, and by functional spending as reported on the end of the year report. So in 22 and 23, you were lower than the statewide average, and in 24, higher than the statewide average, slightly higher. 22,400 compared to 23,200. Your budget consists of town meeting appropriation and a lot of different special revenue accounts called offsets. The total 27 budget is 8.7 million in both revenues and expenditures. And this is your DESI categories of expenditures. And the 1.8 million of offsets being applied to the various categories here. So a gross budget of 8.7, netting out to the town meeting appropriation of 6.8. And this is the 1.8 million of offsets. And you'll see a lot of grants, circuit breaker, school choice. So all of these are different special revenue funds. Totaling 1.8 million. The 27 revenue budget, again, a lot of grants, school choice, circuit breaker, and the town funds roughly 79% of the budget, with the offsets, the special revenue funds, being roughly 31%. And of the offsets, the big ones are circuit breaker and school choice. This chart presents the various budgets, expenditure budgets over time, going back to 2022. And the budgets have ranged gross between $8 million and $9.1 million. With offsets between 1.3 and $2 million, giving you the net budget and the growth in the net budget. And you'll see spikes here. Some with negative growth, meaning a reduced budget over the last 3 years, coupled with very limited growth, and then in 2024, a large spike in growth. So setting up for the projections, what does the offsets look like going back 6 years, including the 27 proposed budget? So what we did here was to go to the end of the year report for 2022 through 25 and took your district budget for offsets for 26 and 27. And you see the totals down here, ranging from 886,000 to 1.8, an average of $1,340,000. So keep this $1,340,000 number, because we're going to use that in our projections. And you'll see the various special revenue funds over time here. So your budget, again, roughly 30% for offsets and roughly 70% for the town meeting appropriation. Your expenditure budget, your offsets over time, your town meeting appropriation, and the average of the 6 years. So your gross expenditures, 8.8 million on average, offsets $1.3 million, town meeting appropriations, 7.4. And your total revenues matching your total expenditures. Just looking at expenditures, what is the growth or decline in gross expenditures over that 6-year period? And you'll see ranges from a negative 6.6 to a 13% increase. But on average, your budget has grown 1.9% over the 6-year period. But keep the 1.9% number in your mind and keep the 1.3 offsets, 1,300,000 in offsets, and a 1.9% increase in expenditures. Chapter 70. So, there's some key terms that I'll go over to help further explain the numbers as we go through this. Each district has a foundation budget. It represents the minimum spending level needed to provide an adequate education. The foundation budget is adjusted each year to reflect changes in district's enrollment, changes in student demographics, grade levels, low income, English language, and inflation, and geographic differences in wage levels. It's primarily based on foundation enrollment, which are the residents that live in the district and attend a public schools. And as we know, the foundation enrollment has declined roughly by 13 students every year. And we mentioned previously low income, English language. Those are going to impact the foundation budget, as we'll see shortly. A local contribution represents the amount that the town provides, the district provides, to meet net school spending. This is a town-wide calculation. A local district contribution is then computed, allocated to each of the regions that each town belongs. So you're going to see a total contribution, and then we're going to split that up to the region that you belong. The rest is Chapter 70. And for years, you've been a minimum aid community. And we'll explain that with numbers shortly. We add the local contribution and the Chapter 78 to get to net school spending. So this is really Chapter 70 and net school spending. And that net school spending must be equal to or greater than the foundation budget. The target of spending. And the Student Opportunities Act allowed much needed increases in the foundation budget based on the Foundation Budget Review Commission's recommendations. And this is the last year, fiscal 27, of the Student Opportunities Act. So going forward, we don't have the Student Opportunities Act to help us make projections. So this term up here, inflation, becomes a key factor in projecting Chapter 70. This chart is your visual of all your Chapter 70 numbers going back to 1993, which was the beginning of education reform and the Chapter 70 formula. The red represents Chapter 78. The blue diagonal represents your foundation budget. The white next to the diagonal blue is your local contributions. The dotted line is your foundation budget, and the solid line is your actual net school spending. So there's a requirement, the dotted line, and you could spend as much as you want on education, and that translates into the actual net school spending. So you'll see after the ramp-up years, you started to spend more in actual net school spending than your requirement, which for many years was equal to your foundation budget. In most recent years, higher than the foundation budget, except for fiscal board. In this chart, it's up through fiscal 25. So this is an important visual, particularly for those of you that like to see visuals. Again, the red Chapter 70, the diagonal blue foundation budget, the white local contribution, the dotted line required net school spending, and the solid line actual net school spending. So where did this graph come from? It comes from the Chapter 70 numbers. This is an Excel spreadsheet on the DESE website. It goes back to 1993, but if I presented 1993, you wouldn't be able to read these numbers. So here's your foundation enrollment, and you've seen the decline in foundation enrollment, roughly 30%. Here's your foundation budget, which has grown. It's grown by 24% over these years. Your required local contribution, that's also grown. Your required your Chapter 70 has also grown. Adding your required contribution and your Chapter 70 gets you to required net school spending. Here's your actual net school spending. It's reported on your end of the year report. And here's the dollars and percent of actual net school spending over the requirement. And your latest actual net school spending greater than requirement is 12%, 11.9%. The statewide average is 26%. So as a district, you're under the statewide average. But for those of you that want all your Chapter 70 numbers, these are your numbers through fiscal '08 to fiscal '25 as budgeted. These are the same numbers looked at differently. And this is really small font. Here's your enrollment numbers and percent change, your foundation budget, percent change, your district contribution to North Brookfield as a percent of foundation, and then the various aid categories over the years, mostly minimum aid. And you'll see that minimum aid, 14 years, you've been minimum aid as opposed to foundation aid. Which was your aid factor for a very few years. Your target aid share, meaning what percent of your foundation budget will the state pay, is roughly 55%. And that's represented in the red here, which is roughly 55% of the total spending. You want to see this red grow, and you want to see the white decline, decrease. So, how are these numbers determined? Again, a lot of numbers here. Let's try to simplify it. Your local contributions are based on your wealth factors, EQV and income. And Matt will explain those numbers shortly. Your foundation enrollment has declined, but your foundation budget has increased. There's three factors: enrollment, inflation are the two main drivers of the foundation budget. The bigger your foundation budget, in theory, the more Chapter 78 you receive. So as your enrollment has declined, why has your foundation budget increased? And that's due to the inflation factors. Primarily the last 6 years from the Student Opportunities Act. So as we start in on your fiscal '27 numbers, I want you to think of three circles or squares. On the left, the foundation budget. What's your target of spending, does the state? And then in the middle, what are your local contributions? How much of the foundation budget should be paid for by the state, and how much of your foundation budget should be paid for by local contributions? And what are these wealth factors that define your local contribution? Once that's done, the third calculation is made, taking your foundation budget, subtracting your local contribution to give you state aid. And that will either be foundation aid or minimum aid. In your case, it's minimum aid. So Matt's going to explain the numbers using the state's Chapter 70 spreadsheets. Matt?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Matt Abrahams. This slide shows your foundation budget calculation for FY27. I know it's small print, but we'll cover the highlights here. So going across the top are enrollment numbers. That first bolded number has your foundation enrollment to the left of the line going down. And then to the right of that, those are counts for particular students like special ed, English language learners, and also the low income number, which we know is a big driver. That's the final column on the right hand side before you get to the total column, which is on the far left, far right. The dollars, so then going downward are different line items. There are 11 different ones, starting with administration, and you have instructional leadership all the way down to special education tuition. There are foundation rates for each of these cells that are computed by DESE on an annual basis. And as Mark alluded to earlier, those rates have been heavily influenced by inflation the past few years because of the Student Opportunities Act. Now that the Student Opportunities Act is concluding or wrapping up, there will still be inflationary factors that are impacting those foundation rates going forward, but they won't be as high as they have been over the past few years. So in other words, you can expect your foundation budget to grow at a lower clip than it has over the past few years while the Student Opportunities Act was ongoing. So the way that it works, the foundation budget, you take the numbers that are at the top, you multiply by the foundation rates for each of the 11 line items, and that's how you get the dollar amounts in each of the cells that are in front of you. That's all totaled up, and that's how you get your foundation and budget. One big total number based on several calculations that you see in front of you. And as was mentioned earlier, the low income group is 10 out of 12. That comes with it a pretty high foundation rate, such that that rate would be lower if the low income grouping was lower. And I think it was mentioned earlier that that just changed recently.
So we mentioned, these are the numbers reported by your principals for the grade levels. Over and above that, you get additional dollars for your SPED kids, English learner kids, and low-income kids. The biggest part of that is low income. So somebody asked how many low-income students are there? It's 216 low-income students. This is for fiscal 27, the final numbers coming out of the final state budget. The SPED students are not actual. These are formula-driven based on the number of students you have over here. A certain percentage gives you your SPED in and out of district numbers. The rest are actual numbers. So your foundation enrollment includes your resident students by grade level, plus the increment above the base components.
Okay, now we're getting into the local contribution. This is the first of two slides on how local contribution is calculated. So Mark mentioned earlier that there's a town-wide component, meaning local contribution at the town level, and then a subset of that is at the district level, and we'll get into that momentarily, but this is at the town level. So each district must fund its local contribution as determined by the state. The local contribution for North Brookfield, the townwide one, is about $5 million. Computing, so that's the target local contribution. It's not necessarily the contribution itself. It's based on its wealth factors, meaning the town's wealth factors. Mark mentioned earlier how it's based on EQV and it's based on income. And you can see the first section on the slide here is the EQV calculation, and the second section is the income calculation. The EQV numbers update every 2 years in this calculation. The income number updates every year, annual. So you combine the two to get a combined effort yield of just over $5 million. And because that number is less than the foundation budget maximum local contribution calculation, that is the target. The $5 million number is the target local contribution for North Brookfield.
This wealth factors are 50-50 statewide. Yours is not quite 50-50, 2.2 million and 2.7 million, but statewide, this calculates to 50-50. 50% of local contribution determined by EQV, 50% determined by income. So that's the 5 million target. And then there's a second test that no matter how wealthy a community may be, their maximum contribution is 82.5% of their foundation budget. Because the state is guaranteeing every district 17.5% of the foundation will be paid for by the state. Then you take the lower of the two, the combined effort yield or the maximum local contribution, and your number is the 5 million because it's the lowest wealth factors compared to the max. And your target age share is 50%, and your local share is 49%. And remember, from key factors, this number was averaging around 55%. So for fiscal 27, the state is going to pay more percentage-wise than they did in previous years.
And the second slide on the local contribution. So now that we've determined the target local contribution, which was just north of $5 million, let's do a calculation for what the local contribution will be for FY27 and then see how that compares to the target. So the first step is to take last year's contribution or the prior year's contribution. So in this case, it would be FY26's, which is that top number, which looks like it's $4.2 million or about that. Yep, just over $4.2 million. That gets increased by the municipal revenue growth factor, which is a number that changes annually. In this case, it's 4.23%. So take that starting number, 4.2 million, you increase it by 4.23% to get a preliminary contribution for FY27 of 4.4 million. That's the third number down on this slide. How does that 4.4 compare to the target? It's short of the target by $598,000. And what is that percentage of being short? It's 5.96%. So then the calculation determines that because it's 5.96%, an increment needs to be added, because that 5.96% is between 2.5% and 7.5%. And that's a 1% increment that's added. That 1% is calculated based on the based on the prior year contribution. So you add that 42,000 to the 4.4 million preliminary contribution, and that gets you what your required local contribution is for FY27. In this case, $4.45 million, which is about $555,000 short of the target. Again, that target was just north of 5 million. So now that we have the town-wide or the local contribution at the town level, let's determine the district contributions. So what's the amount of the town contribution that goes to the North Brookfield district versus the Southern Worcester district? It's based on foundation shares, which in other words is really based on the foundation budgets. So a percentage is calculated based on the total foundation budgets for each of the districts, and then it's divvied up that way. So that 4.45 million is divvied up based on those shares. And $4 million becomes 440,000 becomes the district contribution to Southern Worcester.
So we're back to the townwide contribution split between the regions to which you belong.
Okay, in chapter 78, here's the chapter 78 calculation for FY27. Base aid is the first step, or prior year aid. What was the contribution the prior year? That was about $5 million. The state must fund each district its foundation aid, which is the difference between the foundation budget and the required district contribution. This is the grandfathering effect, such that every district will receive at least what it received in the prior year. So the next calculation is to determine if you're a foundation aid district. You take the foundation budget for FY27, which is about $9 million. You subtract from it the required district contribution of $4 million. That was what we calculated in the prior slide, for a difference of just north of $5 million, which is row 4, 253 on row 4. That number gets compared to your prior year, chapter 78. If it's greater, then you're considered a foundation aid district. If it's less, you are not considered a foundation aid district. And you'll see that since it's less, that next line down, row 5, has a 0 on it. So that means North Brookfield is not a foundation aid district for FY27. So therefore, North Brookfield is a minimum aid district, and the minimum aid calculation is your foundation enrollment times the dollar amount per foundation enrollment, which, even though on the slide it says $75, it was actually $160 per foundation enrollment. And that was the highest number in the past few years, was that 160. So that gives you a minimum aid amount of about $89,000, about $90,000. That number is added to your prior aid, or your base aid, which is your prior year aid, to give you your FY27 chapter 78 number of $5,136,726. And just to put a little bit more context on it, I have a file up that's not on your screen. I'll just say it real quick. Those per pupil aid amounts, I mentioned it was 160 for FY27. FY22 was 30. FY23 and FY24 was 60. FY25 it was $104. FY26 it was 150. FY27 it was 160. Now that is an upward trend because it went from 30 all the way up to 160 without going downward at all. But that doesn't mean it's going to continue upward. This is a number that's decided every year by the state. It is possible that it goes down in future years, not this year, in future years. Okay, so net school spending is the sum of local district contribution in chapter 78 The two combined for FY '26 was about $8.8 million. The two combined for FY '27 is about $9.1 million. That's an increase of about $365,000 from FY '26 to FY '27 in North Brookfield, the district's net school spending.
So, a lot of numbers. The state requires a minimum amount of spending for elementary and secondary education. Statewide average is 28%. You're spending around 11%. Chapter 70 funds around 55% of your foundation budget. The district has received minimum aid in 14 of the last 18 years, and you saw the calculation. For 27, that minimum aid will continue. And your budget is heavily based on school choice, where tuition payments out have exceeded your school choice receipts. So we'll stop there. That's a lot of numbers, budget numbers, revenues, offsets, expenditures, and Chapter 70. Are you numb?
Sorry. Any questions from the committee?
I'm not sure why we are receiving the minimum aid. I'm not quite clicking with that one yet.
Okay. So the state has to fund you at foundation. Your foundation budget is $9 million. Your local district contribution is $4 million. So they have to give you $5,032,253 in Chapter 78. You're going to receive at least what you received last year, $5,046,000. Well, that's roughly $14,000 more than foundation aid. Since your base aid, last year's aid, exceeds your foundation aid, you don't receive foundation aid. That's the zero that Matt talked about. So you're going to receive minimum aid of $160 per pupil times your foundation enrollment, which for 27 was 561 students. Sorry. And therefore, you'll get your base aid plus your minimum aid to total $5,136,000. So if you look at this number and you look at that number, you're only $14,000 difference. Once this number is greater than that number, you get foundation aid. And I would think you would want to strive to get to foundation aid, because then there's more Chapter 70 aid than what you've been receiving in the past.
So how do we do that?
Clearer.
Not really.
You
How
do
we
that by growing your foundation budget or reducing your local contribution. Both your foundation budget and your local contributions are going to grow. So what's the foundation budget drivers? Foundation enrollment. You're losing 30% of your students over the last 20 plus years.
That's it.
So if you can keep your students, you also have a very large choice out payment. If you can reduce choice out student, then your budget will be reduced. Not your foundation budget, but your overall budget. And then you could use that money for different net school spending amounts to increase your foundation budget.
Mark, I believe there's a roughly 230 districts that are minimum aid. How much will the changes in the SOA affect that funding formula? Or will it?
So what that has done is, well, we don't know. That's a big question mark. There's been very little discussion of what happens after SOA sunsets this June 30. The state budget includes a third Foundation Budget Review Commission. It's a commission made up of 29 people knowledgeable in state finance and school finance. So they have to meet, they have to report that out, and the legislature has to opine on their recommendations. The number of minimum aid districts have grown. So I think last year or the year before, it was 212, and now it's up to what 230?
Yeah.
So the two key inflation factors are now the employee benefits, and then a second inflation factor for the other line items that are not employee benefits. And we'll talk about that in our third section when we talk about projections and how those two inflation factors impact future years.
Any other questions from the committee on this section? Or anybody? I think we're good to move on to the next section, Mark.
Okay, projections. We've got two major numbers to project here. One are enrollment, foundation enrollment, choice enrollment, choice in and choice out. And number two, the budgets. And then how much Chapter 70 can the district expect to help support your town appropriation? So, Chapter 70 numbers from the state budget. Enrollment projections provided by the district, adjusted for school choice. Chapter 70 are the final numbers for fiscal 27. Student Opportunities Act will terminate, sunset this June 30. So starting in fiscal 28, the foundation budget rates will be adjusted by inflation, notwithstanding future actions that the legislature might take. So there could be another Student Opportunities Act. But as of right now, we don't know what direction the state will take. So we're going to use the average inflation over the last several years to run the Chapter 70 projections. Our expenditure projections are based on the 6-year average that you saw, a 1.9% increase. Offsets are based on the 6-year average, 1.3 million. And town appropriations are computed based on the difference between expenditures as projected, net of offsets. So let's start with enrollment projections. First, foundation enrollment. Fiscal '27 was 561 students. The average decline annually was 13 students, so we're going to go with that. So our projections start with fiscal '27 and they end with fiscal '32. It's a 5-year projection from '27. So these numbers will affect minimum aid going forward, and they'll affect the foundation budget going forward. Enrollment projections. So the big impact is the closing of West Brookfield's elementary school. So that's going to result in 29 elementary students choicing in, 22 elementary resident students returning, 2 high school choice students coming in, 2 high school resident returning, and a total of 27 new choice out students, resulting in a net increase of 28 students to your district. And we're going to assume half of that are SPED students. So our base is roughly 527,000 of school choice revenues. With an additional 250,000 for choice students coming in. And we're assuming a net of 5 school choice students in going forward. Those are our major assumptions. So school choice revenues coming in jump to 777,000, 802, 827, 852, and 877. So a pretty steady increase in choice in students. Choice out. The base of 1,000,002, 24 resident students returning and are no longer choice out students, a savings of 120,000. And 27 high school students choicing out, 135,000. So tuition out payments, 1,209,000. An increase from the base of 1,194, or roughly $5,000. Low-income students. The average low-income student represents roughly $8,500. So we showed you the 216 low-income students for 27. And their foundation budget impact was 1.8 million. So we take 1.8 million divided by 216, we get 8,500 per pupil for low-income incremental costs. We're assuming 15 additional low-income students from the slide we showed you before. At 8,500, it's an additional 128,000 going into the low-income incremental cost component of the foundation budget, an increase of 128,000. There's a summary of the expenditure projections at 1.9%. So our baseline expenditures increased by 1.9%. Choice out, the increase from the baseline. Choice in, the average of the offsets. Subtotal, the town meeting appropriations to balance the budget so that our total revenues match our expenditures, resulting in roughly 2.1% increase in needed town meeting appropriations going forward. So I doubt you could read these numbers, but this is the chapter 70, and the question is, for the town meeting appropriations, what will the impact of chapter 70 be? Because chapter 70 goes to the town's general fund and helps the town meet the district's appropriations. So Matt will explain to you at a high level what we did and why we concluded minimum aid.
So, keeping with all the timing of the projections, we projected Chapter 78 for the next 5 fiscal years, so FY28 through FY32, using the same calculation that we covered earlier. Start with the prior year's aid. What's the foundation budget? We projected that. What's the required district contribution? We projected that. The difference between the two is that foundation aid test. If it's not greater than the prior year's aid, that means it's a minimum aid year. And as we covered earlier, with the Student Opportunities Act being sunsetted, we're expecting the foundation rates to not increase as high as they have been in the recent past because of the Student Opportunities Act. So we did some number crunching on our own for what we thought the foundation rates would be the next few years. We came up with 6.5% for the benefits area, the benefits line item. And we came up with 2.7% for all of the other line items. And then we ran that by a DESD contact that we have, and those percentages were blessed by him. He thought that we were fine using those as assumptions. So those percentages, though, are below what they
We missed that.
Let me take over.
Yeah, we missed you.
Yeah, let me take over.
have been in the recent past. because of the Student Opportunities Act. So your foundation budget over the last 5 years, because of inflation,
Mark, we can't hear Matt.
Yeah, I can't either, all right.
Opportunities Act being a big factor. I'm sorry? Or no? No?
No, no, yeah,
Sorry, I think my computer's doing something. Can you hear me?
all right, Matt, I'll take over. So here's your 27. And you'll see we've got two different projections here. Here's the 160. Here's the 30. As Matt said, Chapter 70 minimum aid has ranged between $30 and $160, with 104, 150, and 160 being the minimum aid over the last 3 years. So we ran numbers to see if, A, you become a foundation aid community, even with the increase in low income, even with these high Student Opportunities Act inflation rates. And we're not projecting foundation aid, we're projecting minimum aid. So as you can see, $30 is much lower than the 80 or so. But also our foundation enrollment drops by 13 every year. And so the base of foundation enrollment is less multiplied by the 160 or the 30. The conclusion is simple. Minimum aid going forward, which is consistent with, 14 out of the 18 years from our look back. So, our projections, base 27, projecting for 5 years through 32. You rely heavily on school choice. It's projected that more students will choice in the district. The district gross expenditures have increased on an average of 1.9, very reasonable amount. Offsets have averaged around 1.3 million over the last 6 years, notwithstanding last year was like 1.8 million. Chapter 70 has provided minimum aid ranging between 30 and 160 per pupil. With the closing of a nearby elementary school, choice in revenues will continue to increase with a projected net 5 increase in choice students. The town will need about 2% annual increase in appropriations to meet projected expenditures, which to me is very, very reasonable. But our projections are based on some major assumptions. A, school choice assumptions hold true, particularly the increase in choice students and thereby choice revenues. B, there are no major changes in Chapter 70 formula. Chapter 70 foundation rates will be adjusted by inflation, and those inflation factors, 9%-ish for the foundation fringe benefits and the other inflation factor. The expenditure projections are based on a 6-year average, and offsets are based on the 1.3 6-year average. So these assumptions have to hold true to get to that 2%-ish annual appropriation increase. So we threw a lot of numbers at you. Questions?
questions from the committee?
So the assumption here is that you're thinking that we're going to get more students coming into the district, but still with foundation decrease. Number of students overall will be less.
So I got half of that question.
Okay.
Can you, Tim,
Let
can
me
you
try
repeat
again.
it?
Let me try again. On page 46, we're saying that you're projecting we're going to lose 13 students per year. Right? And that's the foundation headcount.
Right, there's two enrollment, foundation, and then your head count.
Right. So enrollment means so foundation enrollment means these are kids who are living in the town, right? Kids who are living in town regardless of where they go to school.
And go to a public school.
Right. But it doesn't necessarily mean our.
They go to a public school, yeah.
Right. So we're projecting that the number of children who live in town who would go to a public school, we're going to say that, we're projecting that that's going to increase by somewhere around 13 children per year. Decreasing.
Decrease.
Right.
Actually added it there.
Based on what, based on the last 23, 28 years
Okay.
of foundation numbers.
And I would say that's probably accurate. I mean, people are having less children. So, I think it makes sense to me that you would see a decrease in the number of children that live in towns. I'm sure that's true for many towns. You don't have to agree with that, it's okay. But what you're saying on top of that is, okay, so the number of children that are going to go down, but the number of school choice kids are going to be increasing. I think that was on page 48, 5 there. You're saying on average that we're going to have an increase of 5 kids. Choice again. Page 48.
Tim, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think, I'll just add to that when we commissioned Mark and his group to do this, we also reached out to NASDAQ, who does enrollment projections.
Yep.
And the projections that they gave us were initially different than what we're looking at tonight, because at that point, we didn't have the West Brookfield activity, if you will. The school had not been closed, and we did not see that influx of students coming, school choicing in, and also students coming back to our district. But I think if looking at the numbers that we are showing coming in, staying in the district, and also going out, based on that, the big part of that is basing that on the West Brookfield kind of numbers, looking at where that falls. I think it's a safe assumption, might even be low, to say that it's a net 5 students per year coming into the district.
Even though the number of students is going to decrease, you feel like, at some point there's going to be more, that number of kids, that gap is going to.
So with the foundation enrollment in general is going to get lower over time, you're saying?
Right, so if that number is going down, but this number is coming up, it kind of feels like the gap between the number of kids available to go to a school and the number of kids that are choicing in.
Yeah.
I'm kind of scratching my head on that one.
So what's our current head count then? Because I know we have the last year's head count up there. I think, do you know our current head count heading into this year?
I don't have the exact number, and I don't need to be obtuse, it's just that with the changeover,
Yeah.
as we're looking at, we had kids who were enrolled this week that are in the district, so even some of these numbers tonight have shifted a little bit. I can get the committee the closest number I can by end of this week, so you can see exactly the number of enrolled students, but
Yeah.
also potentially the projected number of students who live in the community.
Right, yeah, I guess 'cause the reason I asked that is only because if we're looking at, and again, this seems like it might even be outside of what Mark did if you gave him these numbers, but so if we're talking about a number of 5 incremental over the next 5 years for this projection, I think one of the slides showed that we lost, was it 20 or 27 high school students this year?
We have 20 students right now. That was when we finalized these numbers, it was 20 school choicing out from high school, 7 in elementary school. So 27 school choicing out at that time,
Right.
which we took that into account, obviously.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
So we think if we carry that like high school number over, we still think we're gonna gain 5 over, I'm guessing that's what this slide is showing. We're gonna have a positive of 5 students incoming.
Yes.
Okay.
If we think that's going to happen, that number is going to just continue.
We don't think that the number, I believe it was 22 and 29, we don't see that number of students coming back to the district or school choicing into the district every year. That
Right,
number's
that's
going to
why I
level
was
out.
asking.
But I think the 5 number was based on many conversations and looking at also the NESDEC projections, which takes into account your kindergarten age students, which that number is decreasing for our community. So we are seeing a decrease in enrollment for kindergarten age students. So they base a lot of those projections as they go through the grades on those kindergarten numbers.
So over 5 years, our number of students will decrease by 65. The foundation students will decrease by 65. But over that same 5 years, we're expecting 25 students, additional students to come in through school choice. So that sounds like what you're saying is that number, that number of school choice and number of available kids is going to, start to, that gap will start to decrease. I'm not sure why. So what do we think would cause that? Just the closing of West Brookfield? Would cause that? I'm just struggling with the numbers.
Tim, is Bay Path associated within any of these numbers?
Bay Path is not a choice number.
No, I understand, but as far as physical, like, head count,
It's, so,
I know one of the numbers we ran across was students out, but I know that's choice out, but I just didn't know.
that's choice, yeah. There is a number in one of the earlier slides around total tuition cost, which would.
Yeah. Yep. So that'll be more to come on when you get us the head count later on. We'll see stuff like that. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Mark, if some of these budget figures that you have are less than what you have listed, will that change the percentage increase that you calculated out? The town meeting appropriations?
So ours is based on 6 years.
Okay.
So it has to be a large impact to impact that number.
think, Mark, either yourself or Matt had mentioned at one point employee benefits, and that we were going to talk about that later, but I'm sorry if I missed it, but I don't know that we ever got back to that specifically. Maybe we did and I missed it. I just wanted to just question because I know those are the hot topic,
Yes,
high percentage increases.
6.9%.
yeah, we did talk about it.
I think you referenced a 6.9% increase for benefits. That's you ran that by Rob at Desi.
Oh, okay. I missed it.
Yeah,
That was a state average for the increase for benefits?
so here's your benefits line in the foundation budget, driven by the foundation rates, by the student base components here. And then the inflation is built into those foundation rates. So Matt went back, I think it was 6 years, took the average of the increases. That came to what, Matt, 6.9 for fringe? And then the other inflation factor was applied to the other 10 line items.
6.5%.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any questions?
I had one question. It was with what Nancy was asking about our local decrease in enrollment. That's happening all over the state. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess my thought is that if the number of children is decreasing, wouldn't the number of children moving in, I guess that's what my thought was, okay, if the number of children available is decreasing, wouldn't the number of children available to come into our district also decrease as well? So,
Well, I'm wondering if it goes on all across the state, if Desi's going to have to do something with their formulas and figure out what's going on with giving more aid to places that need it.
everybody's been talking about that for
Long
forever. Oh, goodness. I think 20 years ago I got involved in schools, and the big thing was, let's change chapter 70, and nobody's gonna change chapter 70. It just doesn't change.
It'd be nice if they do.
It would be
It
nice.
would be.
just-
No, I know that they've been doing that, asking about that for a long
For
time.
a long time.
So the foundational student enrollment numbers are coming from, like, decreasing by 13 per year because the population of school-age children is decreasing, families are smaller, like you said. I think for at least those first 5 years, the increase of maybe 5 students per year is because you can make some predictions about the fact that the families that already came over and enrolled from West Brookfield here or returned may already have siblings. Like, even, you can make the prediction that if a family is here with 2 kids and there's another child at home that's a year old, that in 4 years they would be here too.
But
Could be
then
a part
at
of
some
some.
point,
But then when they
Yeah,
get to
at some
6th or 7th, there's the possibility that they go back. That's the thing. There's
Yeah.
so many different possibilities. I
Yeah.
mean,
so I
I
kind
just
of
think
feel like
that's a
it's
little
that you've got this number of students and this number of students, and they're probably gonna go down at the same general rate. So if you do a percentage wise, that's, I guess, my thought is, so thank you, is it's kind of like, everything's gonna it's probably not gonna do one of these. It's probably gonna do one of these. So, that to me makes sense. I don't know how, what that does to numbers and things like that, as far as, the projections, and if you know that the incoming kids is gonna be less just because there are less children to income, to come in. But, I guess that's kind of like what was sort of not clicking in my head. So thank you.
Brandon?
Yeah, just so I'm clear, the projection was an increase of 5 per year due to the closing of West Brookfield? Or, okay, is there any, that's just throwing in the system-wide here. Is there any protection on the high school level? Because, that's just on the elementary school,
Right.
has affected the elementary school.
Well, that's what I was asking about, if there was a projection for out, which is where we tend to see more.
Yeah, not only just out, but just a natural decrease
Right.
in student population. How is that affecting the population?
Oh, I see, over time, you just.
How's that affecting the junior, senior high school
I mean,
population?
I didn't do any of the projections, that was more of a question for Mr. McCormick on the number 5.
Yeah.
I thought the 5 was a net between what they get in
It was.
and what goes out,
Right.
wasn't it?
Yeah, but that's still not giving a protection on the junior, senior high school level. That's including,
But that was, so that took into account the number of school choice kids in the elementary and the high school, but also the school choice kids out of the elementary and the
Right.
and the
well, I
high
was
school.
looking for.
So that was still a net 5 school choice in.
Yeah, I understand that. but I'm
Just reviewing the numbers, and it's on slide 47. When we finalized when Mark finalized this presentation, we had 20 high school students who were choicing out that we knew of, and we had 7 at the elementary school. We had 2 high school students returning, 2 high school students choicing in, 22 elementary residents returning, and 29 students elementary choicing in.
Yeah, I know, but the presentation is a 5-year projection, so I'm
Correct.
kind of trying to see if there's a 5-year.
Right, that was my initial question, because year 1, you would expect that's going to be the biggest influx, and then that high influx wouldn't continue
Wouldn't
on.
continue,
Right, but then if we still have 20 leaving at the high school level, it would be reverse, it would be minus 15. I mean, if we're saying we're getting 5 kids every year from West Brookfield, or wherever, it'd be more like a minus 15.
Right. So,
Because, I mean, I don't think every year we're going to gain, I mean, that would be pretty incredible, but.
well, so the numbers that I did for school year 25-26, so we had a 49, I believe it was 49.7% school choice out for junior high school. So, I mean, I didn't do like numbers back to see what the trend was, and if that trend would hold.
Right, I don't know what the yearly amount is either, to be honest with you.
Right.
Something we can, look at a later time. I mean, that was something that, Mr. McCormick had given him anyway, so he's,
Right.
We can do that.
Yeah,
We can look at that
I
stuff.
believe in
separately.
the community's drive, there is choice out and choice in numbers from the last couple of years. I can pull around, see if they're in there, but I have sent the committee, or shared with the committee, through Danielle, some pie charts, some graphs that show those numbers.
Yeah, and I did a little bit of just noodling around in my head with just the 25-26 numbers. And I believe, just my PC died. I believe the elementary was 29%, which was really close to the state. But then, I believe the high school, junior and senior high school, 49.7. That number kind of hits me in the head right now, which is, the average school, the state average is 25%. That's close to double for the high school. And I didn't know if, we're saying that number is going to, that choice number is going to decrease percentage-wise. But this time it's not.
Any other questions?
How does homeschool student numbers, we don't get anything for them in foundation enrollment, is that correct?
Wouldn't they be part of that?
No. I'll
Mark, school
I'll have to double
homeschool?
check on that. That's a good question. That's a good question.
Would they be eligible to go to school?
So, if a family decides to homeschool their children, they still have access to services, they still have access to
Right.
social events. We need to communicate with the school, and we typically communicate with families if we know the family, or we do a child find to make sure that they don't need or they need services.
Yep.
But I'm not, I'd have to double check, maybe Mark, you could shed some light on this. I don't know if we receive any financial gain from homeschool students.
Mark, did you hear that?
No, a choice in student,
Homeschool.
yeah, a choice in student would be the foundation enrollment of that sending district.
Homeschool
It
students?
wouldn't impact your foundation enrollment.
No, I was asking about
Homeschool.
homeschool.
No, it's not a public school.
Right. So it doesn't, there's no financial impact.
Homeschool is not included in foundation. Right.
Thank you. That's
Oh,
what I
interesting.
assumed.
Okay, thank you.
If a homes,
But we would be required to provide services?
Yeah.
What's that? Sorry.
So if they're not included in foundation, but we have to, but we could potentially need to provide services?
There have been some situations where a homeschool child has needed some services, or they want to be on a basketball team, for example, or come to a dance, and we obviously afford them that
Sure.
opportunity.
But they're not included in the calculation?
Correct.
Anybody else? All right, well, Mark, I think that's it for questions, unless Tim you want to add anything while he's still here?
No, Mark and Matt, I appreciate your time today. I know that this was, behind the scenes, we had several conversations. We're looking at numbers and providing information, and there's a lot of information in this presentation, so I thank you for your time, your services here tonight. I believe that you left your email addresses if the committee has any further questions. They can reach out to you through me or even on their own if they have any further questions. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
How does everyone feel about a 5-minute recess to use the bathroom, and then we'll come back and we do have a second agenda item. All right, so it's 7:53 p.m. Call this meeting back to order from our recess, for a brief recess. So we had a second agenda item on there. It was a recap to the committee from myself, Nancy, and Mrs. McCormick, who was also in attendance. We met with Quaboag Superintendent, Mr. Duff, and their chair of their school committee, because they had reached out, letting us know that they were interested in potentially talking to us further about anything up, basically, the email originally, which I forwarded out to you guys, said collaboration, so the thought was go sit down and meet with them and see exactly what they're thinking. They're clearly interested in doing something with us at some point still. You know, it's one of those things where I wanted to make it a conversation there where we were kind of trying to listen to what they had to say, because if we weren't with a full committee. So, you know, no decisions were made, nothing like that. It was just strictly, hey, here's what we could look at in the future, you know, if you want to. So we want to bring that to back to our committee. Detail-wise, I don't know, Nancy took a lot of notes, I think. She might. So I'm going to have Nancy go kind of through what they talked about, and then Mr. McCormick, if he wants to add anything that we might have missed.
Yep, so I have some notes. We talked about the tuition agreement mostly, and then we did touch on the regionalization. And so we talked about for a tuition agreement that we would potentially look at sending middle school, which would be 7th and 8th grade plus high school. We would be able to have some people on the school committee, but there would be non-voting school committee members if we were to do that. There was some questions about transportation, whether, and this would be something that we'd have to look into, if there would be increase in transportation transportation costs because of the additional distance for getting kids there. And then there was also, okay, no, I'm not gonna go through that. We would not need to bring all the teachers at their school to the same dollar amount that our teachers are at. Let's see. Right now, they have, for school size, they have, in the 7th and 8th grade, they have 200 students and they have 380 students at Quaboag. So if we were to look at adding that, they felt that with minimal cost increases, with some cost increases, but minimal cost increases, they could take in our kids. In the tuition agreement, I believe the Quaboag School Committee was meeting tonight, same night as we were, and we were going to discuss with us. We did touch on regionalization. It would take a few years to do the regionalization. The transportation costs were kind of a big plus as far as regionalization, in that my understanding of my notes here is that the regionalization with the bus costs would be covered. We would have school committee members for the regionalization. There would be voting members on the regionalization. Trying to read my notes. We would have to bring the teachers up to the same salary as the Brookfield teachers, which could, in the eyes of the school committees, could make a regionalization agreement with us more. So those were my notes from the meeting. I don't know if you had anything to add on those?
I mean, what I'll say is, being around for a while, kind of knowing, how everything got started back when it got started, and I mean, I think the overarching reason they reached out was because the situation is different now. They closed an elementary school. So when we first looked at regionalization, there was no consolidation. There was all buildings stay open, basically. So it could potentially change the projections on regionalization down the line. That's kind of what was one of my takeaways, at least. But on the flip side, what my other takeaway was too is that just hearing the superintendent talk is they're a small school district, we're a small school district. We both have our struggles with finances and being able to provide what we really want to provide for our students at times. So I think my opinion, and this is strictly my opinion, is that, I don't know that tuition agreement's the right thing. I don't know that regionalization's the right thing. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answers to these questions. But I think, like what we saw tonight with the projections, I think we need to keep looking at options to where we can get to a point where we saw a lot of what was in the surveys that Mr. McCormick sent out, what students want. They do clearly want more extracurricular activities, they want more sports, they want things. So there's other schools around here who are currently offering them. So I think what we need to really dig in and look at is how realistic is it that we can rebuild a student population to get these sports back here, and over the years, how long is that going to take and what's that going to cost? I think those versus looking at other agreements or potential agreements are things that we need to do, and that's our responsibility and our obligation to do. And I think if we don't, we're not doing justice to the kids and the future kids of this district. Because if we just don't do anything and we just kind of let things go as they are, we kind of saw what happened several years ago when regionalization started and we lost the soccer team. Now we lost the field hockey team. These things don't help our students come back. So if we have a way of doing that, we need to figure it out fast. And look at the two comparisons side by side and see which makes more sense. My opinion is that they're more than willing to have some sort of joint committee formed. That's kind of one of the things they brought up, doesn't have to be just for regionalization, doesn't have to be just for tuition. It can be something where community members get involved, town selectmen, you know, someone from our group, superintendents, where we all put our heads together and say, hey, how can we provide more for our kids in this area? I think that's a good thing to do. And even if it's as small as a transportation share, you know, whatever might come out of those conversations, I think conversations are good for our kids. We have a lot of kids, it's pretty sad right now to me, at the 6 or 7 through 12 level, and this is nobody's fault. I'm not putting blame on anybody. I'm not, you know, saying anybody did anything wrong. We're a victim of our size. You know, we're a small town. There's one other town in the state that has a smaller school enrollment than us. It's Hatfield. They're the only other one at a single standalone school district. It's not easy to do. Other schools regionalized years ago for a reason, because you can provide more opportunities. That's why we originally went into regionalization, is to be able to provide more opportunities for our kids. Superintendent at the time clearly spelled that out. We just don't have the enrollment. I mean, we just need to figure out something. You look at the kids in the 6 through 12 age group from North Brookfield, and it really is sad to me that they're like separated. They're all in 3 different spots right now. Like, we have a contingency at Quaboag, we have a contingency at Quaboag, we have a contingency here. Like, trying to figure out how we can get these kids to like maybe stay together. I know you're not gonna have 100%, there's gonna be kids that go to Baypath, Baypath's a great school, but how do we form something where all of these kids can get more? I mean, field hockey's a good example. We lost it here, and even at Quaboag, they're struggling for a full field hockey team. So like sharing things is not a bad thing, I don't think. It's only gonna increase student opportunities, and I think we need to look at how we can increase those opportunities, however it might be. You know, something small, something big, I don't know what it is, I don't have the answers, I'm not claiming to have the answers. I just really want to see, you know, I worry about, you know, with us losing sports versus, you know, that in extracurricular activities, we don't have drama right now. Like, that's what kids want, you know what I mean? Other schools have that, maybe our kids can participate there. You know, maybe it's something as small as that, I have no idea. But that's my 2 cents, so.
Can I just add
Yeah.
a little to that? So I asked, so we had our meeting, and I said, as we were leaving, I said, Matt, you know, I'd really like to look around. I've never been in this school, and I'm a data person. I need to see things to understand. And so, you know, we went back and we asked the superintendent, hey, can you just show us around? And I saw things that I would love for our kids to have. You know, they had a room where it was basically like a mock-up of like a hospital room where they had beds and they had like the CNA training, and these kids are able to do phlebotomy and learn how to do EKGs. These kids are walking out of high school making $45,000 to $50,000 a year because they're getting the training in high school to be able to do this. They've got drama. Our cultural council received a grant request from Quaboag for Legally Blonde 2, junior, for January 2026. They put on the play. They had 2 different showings. It was a sold-out show. But some of our kids from North Brookfield were in the drama production, and we were like, yeah, definitely, we want to support our kids. And I just, you know, my feeling is, and one of the reasons why I'm here is I love kids, and they don't have to be my kids. They can be somebody else's kids, but you know, I'd like to see the best that we can offer, and that's why I decided I wanted to run for school committee, is to give our kids the best opportunities as quickly as they can, because they grow up fast, the opportunities go by them, and I really feel like we need to look at this for the kids in our town to see if this would be a better situation. All those things that those kids ask for, all the things that the parents ask for, you know, they can get these things right away from Quaboag, and no situation is going to be perfect for everybody, but I think if we can do the best that we can for as many kids as we can, I think think we have an obligation, I feel like I have that obligation, that's why I'm here, this is why I do this. So, you know, I think we should look into it, because, you know, life is not gonna get easier for these kids. You know, it's really hard now for kids, and it's gonna get harder. And if they're not, you know, if they have more opportunities to do more hands-on stuff in their school years, you know, I don't think they can wait. I don't think that they have, I don't think we can wait to build what they want if it's just over here. And we can give them that opportunity over here, a couple towns over. I really think we should look into it and give it a really fair look-see and make a really fair decision, not for us, but for these children, for these kids and their future.
The reality is that we already, I mean, the school board, I think you were on the committee at the time, probably, in November of 2024. You guys voted it forward anyway, the
Yeah,
regionalization. It was, Quaboag's the one that voted it down because part of the financial projections, like without any consolidation, wasn't gonna change anything. So that's on regionalization, but I mean, there's a lot, obviously, that needs to be looked into. It's not something we can just snap our fingers and happen anyway. So that's one of the things coming out of this, I'm hoping to see is that what are we looking at and how long will it take to get some of those things that our kids were asking for here? Like, we need to look at both options. I mean, I think that's a reasonable ask, is to figure out, you know, what the kids, I know this year we started with the Spanish teacher, so building on that, but like if we need to go to the town and say, hey, for the next 10 years, are we gonna be able to get X amount over because we want to do this at the school and build this? We need to know those, we need to have a plan too, if we're going to stay like we are. And I think that's, you know, I think anybody would agree with that part of it. There has to be a stepping process to that and that we can afford it. And if we can, and it's a viable option, that should be looked into as well. I'm for it, whatever works best, whatever would be the best opportunity. So.
Did the Quaboag superintendent or the chair of the school committee discuss anything outside of the realm of the tuitioning and the regionalization? I guess I misunderstood the request for the meeting. I thought it was sharing resources, collaboration to share resources.
Yeah.
Like, I was almost excited thinking, oh, we're gonna come back and they're gonna be like, oh, we were thinking we could add an additional speech and language pathologist. They're gonna be like 0.5 here in this district and 0.5 over here with you guys. And what if we did, like, I thought it was gonna be more of a shared resources, not a go back and rediscuss something that we spent most of last school year discussing in these meetings. And I'm gonna strongly suggest it for all of you, if you haven't, and you know there's a lot of them, the financial presentation that was already done last year by a private consultant regarding the tuition agreements. Any of the meetings where students that were currently here spoke, where their parents spoke. And I just have a really hard time with the fact that before it was voted down last year, there seemed to be no talk of West Brookfield closing. I think that Superintendent Duff was counting on the money and the tuitioning happening, and when it got shut down and we ended the talks and we put it to the side to move forward, then all of a sudden their elementary school is closing. In hindsight, I can't get past the thought that, in my opinion, if we had agreed to it, the money for the tuitioning agreement was going to support keeping that elementary school open, not support the kids that they were saying, bring over to the middle school, high school, and we can give them this, and we can give them this, and we can give them this. But it seemed like the money we were going to send over if we agreed to it was going to be what saved their elementary school. I fear that they're not being transparent, that this is part of why, that us stopping the tuition agreement talks last year, keeping the money in-house here, is why their elementary school is closed.
And I think those concerns, we could talk about that if we put together a team that went through all of these conversations.
I think they're valid concerns based on the timing. I don't disagree with that. what I would say to that though is, unfortunately, in these circumstances, based on things I've read and people I've talked to, not locally, but when you get to that level, unfortunately, I mean, there's districts that don't even talk to each other out there. Like, there's things that happen behind the scenes that, you know, I cringe about when I hear. I mean, this is supposed to be for the benefit of the kids. I mean, I guess what I would say to that is, if at the end of the day, we're not doing something, and that came up a lot in our talks, like, you know, teachers brought up, well, they strung us along for a few years now, you know, and I get those past feelings and things like that, but what I have to say to that is, you know, the 13-year-old kid who's roaming the hallways, who has no sport to play, like, should we be, like, holding him hostage because we don't like what, you know what I mean? Like, I think I get what you're saying, but like my personal feelings, I try to put my personal feelings aside because I felt the same way when it was initially voted down, regionalization, because we all voted for it, we thought it was going to go forward. But then I took a step back and I re-examined everything. At the end of the day, there's still more offerings for our kids. There's still kids that are leaving here and going there and doing great things. I mean, so it's, you
Well,
can't.
we are still bringing things back. Like, I know you
Yeah.
mentioned we lost the field hockey team, but we're
Yeah.
adding volleyball, we're rebuilding soccer. They've added the co-op for football and baseball, and why do I feel like there's one other that I missed?
I think this conversation on field hockey co-op as well with Quaboag.
Potentially.
So to me, my opinion on, like you asked about, did they say anything else besides tuition and regionalization? You know, that was what they talked about more, probably, yes. But they also are open, he said they're open to anything in between that. So,
But they didn't
so to
bring
me,
anything
the
to the table
Quaboag,
that night.
the field hockey thing is a prime example of that.
Yeah.
If we have an ongoing joint committee of both schools, we can talk about these things versus like it being sent out in an email and it wasn't even confirmed yet by them. Like, you know what I mean? We need to like confirm it. Like, I found out about it and I was like, oh, that's cool, and it wasn't even signed off on yet. So those are things like, if we have that partnership and relationship, we can do things like that. That's my opinion.
I think I'm all for sharing resources with
Yeah.
any district in conversations. I'm going to be super honest. I am completely against going backwards and talking in the next year or two about a tuition agreement again with them. Because we saw how much, for all the kids that spoke and all the parents that sat and spoke in all of these meetings last year, the trauma that was causing some of these kids of just the thought of it happening, I can never get past.
Yeah, and I have some things I could say to how the kids were brought into this equation, and you know, I'll talk to you offline about it, but some, you know, things that I think weren't done on the up and up, but that's another conversation. We don't have to decide here. We're not deciding here tonight if we're going to regionalize our tuition out. But it's not.
No, but I think it's okay for us to all know where
Yeah.
where we're sitting currently.
Yep. And so
It's just where-
my question to you would be, so you say you're not good with talking about this for the next year or two. In the next year or two, what would you like to see happen for us to plan for the future?
I would like to see us really look and analyze some of the things that came out of those meetings with the multiple stakeholders, the students, the teachers, the community members, and just start to build and add. I think some steps have already been taking place, and they're steps, but we can keep building upon those. If a CNA type thing and curriculum is going to be added, as we're expanding the Project Lead the Way courses, as we're digesting the district strategic plan, what do we want to add into it for the next couple of years? If Spanish is back, if we're adding some sports, and looking at partnerships and resource collaboration first before readdressing a tuitioning thing. Because I feel like when we made that vote it was late winter, early spring, it was part of what was discussed immediately following that. Was
Right.
What can we do to rebuild what's here?
Yeah.
Because that was what the families and students were asking of us.
Yeah, I get that. My opinion is that we probably voted prematurely, that we didn't have a door number 2 yet. We don't have the plan for the standalone district for the future. Like, we're just rolling along as is. I mean, I had talked to the superintendent during the task force meetings about him getting a sustainability plan for us, and that's what he was working on, so I'm assuming we'll see that at some point. Correct?
I think what you saw this past spring, and what we talked about over the summer, that reimagining North Brookfield Public Schools is a big part of that.
Okay.
This piece tonight gave you more insight for the next 5 to 6 years on what the district, as a standalone district, would cost the town. I think that number was pretty clear tonight.
If we stay as is without adding anything.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
I guess what I'm talking about is the
The one-
additions.
But we are adding things. And I think the one thing that was not discussed tonight is that we have done a very good job of building back up our revolving accounts to support those additional pieces, to offset the budget, that we can't sit here as a group of 6 people and say, well, let's go to the town and convince the town to give us more money. We need to develop that system, that structure internally, which we're doing, we've done. I'm very proud of that. And again, I want to just make mention, we did not make any cuts this year. In fact, we have added positions. So I think a big part of that conversation that, we're looking at what can the district do for its kids now, and our school year starts next week. We already have 3 or 4 things that have already started for those students. That health services pathway, which we're building, we had that grant to build it out for the 27-28 school year, is a big deal. That's a very big deal. You mentioned the CNA. That will bring that whole plethora of classes and coursework to North Brookfield in a year and a half for our students. Now, I get it. We want things now.
Right.
I get that. But that's not the way the process works. The process is very incremental, it's phased in, and they want to make sure you have a viable option for kids and support it financially.
And I understand all that. I'm not saying you should be able to snap your fingers and have all these things tomorrow. I get that that's not realistic. I guess what I'm saying is, when is the point that we're too low to build back up? Like that's my fear, is that our numbers are going to be so low that.
Well, our numbers are going to be higher this year than they were last year.
In the high school?
I mean, district-wide.
No, I'm talking about the high school is where the issue
High
is.
school in particular, I think
But
last year
district-wide,
we had
I think to the bigger point too, is if we have these programs, by the time these kids who transition from 2nd to 3rd to 4th to 5th grade, they see these programs flourishing. I mean, it's all subjective, but, can we put a number on that? Will 5, will 10 more kids stay in district that were initially school choicing out? I don't know yet.
Yeah.
We don't know yet.
And a lot of it's guesses and projections based on past history. That's what makes me nervous is 2011, 15 years ago, they went through a lot of this and they came up with all these great ideas and things they could add. And 15 years later, we're, in the position
But I
we're
think
in.
there's a lot to be said that we had a lot of these meetings over the summer and last spring, and it wasn't talk. Things already started to change. Things have already been added back in. Like, it wasn't like we came up with all these
I get it.
ideas and nothing came from it.
I wasn't
Things
insinuating that.
No,
If
I know.
If I was,
just-
I apologize.
No, it's just that like it's happening, but it takes time, and I think we owe it to the kids that are here, that wanted to be here, the families that are in support of us continuing to be a standalone, and his projections tonight. If the town needs to come up with 2% increase each year fiscally to make that happen,
Right.
that's so reasonable.
Yeah, if we don't have other things that happen. like,
Right.
I thought that was just keeping what we had today.
It
I
is.
think that was additional.
No, that's-
I mean, you'd have to put a lot more money into. the
But a
school.
lot of what the things that have added, I mean, some of it comes from, like, there's grants that are out there, and the point is, if we start a program and it's successful, then it's a little bit of a different situation to go back to the town and say, I know he predicted 2, if you can give us 2.5, we can then add A, B, and C to support the program that got started a year ago.
But if the wheel has already been invented, and the wheel is living 2 towns away, in the school year, 2027 school year, kids can have sports, and all kinds of different sports, and they can have, drama, and they can have CNA, and they can have fire science, and they can have food, food preparation, and all kinds of different classes. They're only going to stay this age for a very short amount of time, and I see how the world is changing at lightning speed right now. I'm concerned about the time. I'm concerned about kids who are in 7th grade right now that could be going in to a high school program for CNA, having to wait for a couple of years. Well, their opportunities will be gone. And so what do you do, what do you say to that kid? Well, gee, I'm really sorry you could be making $45,000 a year, but you're not. You're gonna have to work at Wendy's. I don't know. I mean, part of me just says, you know, if it's right there and it makes sense. I don't have all the data right now, but if it makes sense, if we can look at it and it makes sense, don't we have somewhat of a moral obligation to make sure these kids have the best opportunity in the town that they can have?
And I think we listened to a lot of different sides of that last year, but like I said, in my mind, and the videos are out there, go watch them, listen to the kids, the letters that they wrote. Some of these kids have literally stood in this room and told us, I wouldn't survive, literally, physically, wouldn't survive outside of here. The smaller class sizes, the student-to-teacher ratio, the staff that's in this building that would not go over to Quaboag with them, the personal relationships, a lot of them described it as like, this is my family, this is my home, this is my house. If I have to go somewhere else, or especially for some kids that went there and came back and said, I literally cannot function there. They want the smallness that is provided here.
That's the minority that comes, I don't know how many kids have come back and, you know.
I don't think it was the minority for the kids last year.
We have 50-something kids at Quaboag, 50-something kids.
No, but I mean for the ones that stay, for the ones that were here, there are the reasons that they're here.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the ones that come back.
No, like the kids, some of the kids that have school choice out and then said no and returned here, some of them spoke. The kids that have always been here spoke. Kids that have been in other districts besides just Quaboag came and spoke.
And I get all that, but we go back to square one. We voted to regionalize once upon a time. So we all thought that getting more opportunities for our kids was a good idea in town. I mean, that's what Mr. Lynn said in 2021, that we don't have the resources here to do the activities that kids want. That's what I'm basing most of my opinion on, is that I see what we offer. It's less than what other schools offer. If we can get to the point, we don't have an obligation to, serve. I mean, if you look at the data across the state of how standalone districts and the sizes of the towns, we are like, no one does it like this. Like, it's not normal. It's hard to do. Tim's done a great job managing the budget for it. But the problem, we have bare bones right now. He doesn't have a lot of support staff like other schools. You look at other schools, maybe your school, admin pages, they're filled with assistants. He's by himself, basically, He's got a couple of people in his office. If we have to make cuts in the future, we're in trouble. That's what makes me really nervous, is I've seen the town, and if we have to go to them one year because we have, like, let's say there's a sped moving or whatever, and something that we climb, we don't have enough reserves. What are we gonna do? We're gonna cut more from our kids who already have less. That's what pulls at me, is seeing the potential if we don't have a solid, like, projected plan of how we're gonna use our money. And I know Tim's doing what he can, like he explained, with building back up, the account for the choice in, which is definitely grown. But I mean, I still worry that.
I don't want to simplify it just like that. I mean, the revolving accounts are a big part of it. So school choice receiving and circuit breaker are two revolving accounts that we want to be robust. But again, I said this before, the fact that we built multiple sustainable internal special education programs, that we keep kids in district, that's a huge saving. That's a benefit to our kids. So those things also factor in to the long-term sustainability of us as a district. I'm receiving all your concerns. They're all valid. They're all your own personal thoughts and beliefs about what we should do for our students. I think it's the superintendent's job number one is to be a steward of the district and to build opportunities for kids. It's not my job to tell a family or kid what's best for them. You need to do this, you need to do that. It's to provide opportunities for those kids to be successful while they're in our district. And I know we're doing a pretty damn good job of that. And that's not just my doing. It's thanks to our building principals, to our special education director, our teachers who step up on a regular basis. The tricky part about this is that we're a very impatient society. We want things done now. And sometimes we can't build things. We're building things as we're flying. And we're doing that as quickly as we can, but sometimes it's just not quick enough.
History's not on our side either, the numbers that would,
But I think I just want to be very careful. It's a subjective thing to say well, we should send you over there because they have that. Not every kid wants that. Not every kid wants CNA. We're building out that opportunity for the kids who want it, but not every kid who's in North Brookfield wants a CNA program. Not every kid wants to play soccer. There are kids who do, and we want to build it for them, but there are kids who don't, could care less about playing soccer. And we want to give them the best opportunities we can. And I think that's just where I caution, that conversation. Again, it's about building opportunities for students, building opportunities for their families. It's not dictating what we think kids need to have. I think we need to be careful of that. That's just...
Yeah, and I think, I get all those things, and I appreciate the comments, and I get it. I look at it I look at it from a parent who sees, I'm not just talking about the athlete who wants to play soccer. The athlete has friends. Friends go with that person. Then you have it tends to be this snowball thing, just from talking to families who left this year. It's like, there were kids that left to go play soccer, and then they had friends that left with them because their friends were leaving. So it's just, there's more to it than just not having the sport, because I definitely realize not everyone's an athlete. I wasn't suggesting that, you have to have a certain amount of sports to be a successful school, but I think it doesn't help if all the other public schools around have that's an option. It just leads to the domino effect. And I mean, the part that kills, we have employees here who send their kids elsewhere. So I look at that as like, if we're believing in our district, why are employees going elsewhere when they get to high school? You know what I mean? And to speak to your point about what the kids and parents said here, both my kids go to another district, and I hear a lot of the opposite. So you know what I mean? We don't get those choices once they're gone. They don't come back here and tell us, hey, this is my great experience. So you're also missing out on hearing 50% of what kids are getting and what they really like about where they went. There's something to be said there too. And hearing from parents, I would say I didn't hear from 160 parents last year. I heard from a percentage, So there are some parents who didn't say anything one way or the other about staying here. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
Our school choice out kids who are leaving for the education, the sports, the whatever, how many of those are low-income kids?
That's a good question.
So
I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm going, whatever.
I think I know where you're going with this.
I
think I have the same thoughts.
I was low income, my kids were all low income. When it came to where we wanted to go to school, it wasn't a choice. Because we could not transport to another district. I was working 3 jobs. It was not pack the kids in the car, bring them to wherever they wanted to go to school. So my sympathy for school choice out to get to sports and to get to whatever classes is a little different, because I'm concerned with making the best of what we can do for our kids that don't have a choice. I know that technically, according to the letter of the law, everybody has a choice. They can go to whatever school they want. That's great. We can't get there.
Exactly.
So we're here. So I am not nearly as interested in regionalization or tuitioning as I am in getting this school, I want to see a school climate where students are building relationships, not cliques. I want to see relationships, and I know there have been some improvements, but the staff relationships, the admin and staff, the admin and parents, all these relationships, if they can improve, we're going to see improvements here. So I hear a lot about surveys that are done, conversations that are had, questions that are asked. I've never seen a survey. I saw one survey way back once upon a time, I think with tens of them. And the survey that she showed me did not impress me at all, because it didn't ask any of the questions that I'm curious about. But that's my concern, is that when we're talking about all these kids who are school choicing out, how do we get them to stay? They're gonna go wherever they wanna go because they can.
Exactly.
What about our kids that are here?
if we,
That's where my focus is, where it's always been, and this is the first time I've actually like, you know, said whatever it was that was in my head, but that's where my focus is. We looked at regionalization once upon a time. The contracts and the deals that they were talking about did not impress me at all. I know that we can be great here. I know that we can have something in this school that keeps these elementary school kids, because I know they hit like 6th grade, 7th grade, and that's when they scatter. That's fine, but I think that if we can really build that school climate to include these kids and parents that are just walled off, they're like secluded, they're here, but they're not here, they're not invested, they're, you know, they got other issues that they're worried about. They don't care about school, they don't care about sports, they don't care about field trips, they don't care because they have other bigger pressing issues. I'm also very interested in utilizing the community, like community service ideas that you were talking about. Got me so excited. Like community service at the senior center, at the ambulance barn, at, you know, the fire department, the police department. There are just so many opportunities that may spark interest that would start a fire that our kids, gotta remember years ago we had search and rescue, which was, we got basic, like first aid training, map reading, compass reading, and when there were searches in the area, like we just had a girl, what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, went missing up by Brooks. Our high school kids would go out as part of the search team because they were trained in grid searches, command, all that stuff was fantastic. And all that went away. And that's a low income program. You don't have to get tons of equipment, you don't have, like, those are the things that I am focused on, that would spark the fire, that would get them interested, all of them. Not just the ones that can go if they want to, but the ones that are stuck here are the ones that I'm most interested in.
so that's very similar to some thoughts that I had, and so I'm glad that you said that. Because I kind of feel like with the, if in fact you've got 55% of the kids that are in our school that are low income, and hey, I volunteer at you know, the food collaborative, I know these people. I mean, I visit these people on a weekly basis. I know their stories. So it doesn't surprise me whatsoever. What I will say is that as a working mom, who was a single working mom, my kids didn't have an opportunity to do other things because I wasn't there to get them there. So if there's a bus that takes them to school and they have these other opportunities, doesn't that start to remove some of the barriers, those, and I'm not going to say they're artificial barriers, they are real, honest to God barriers. If nobody's available to take you to school so that you can go to another school and play soccer, you know, maybe you want to, maybe you've never played soccer before, but if there's that barrier that says, well, mom works full time, she's, you know, she leaves at 7, she comes home at 7, I have no way to get to another school to do other things. If they're providing that transportation, doesn't that start to remove some of those barriers?
Not for me, it didn't. I went from
Well,
here to Quaboag. I think it was 6 months, I don't think I did a full year at Quaboag. And came back here with more trauma than I went.
Okay.
It was, I went from straight A's, like high honor student,
Why?
to,
Why
because
was it?
I was
If you don't
here,
mind my asking.
here I was, I don't know, an average fish in a little pond.
Okay,
And when I went there, I was bait.
okay.
That's it, you're sending our little community into a community that has been together since kindergarten, is very hard to break into unless you hit a certain social status, like as you're coming in. But if you're at if you're a low man in the feeding chain and you go over there, you're even lower.
Times have changed with the choice. There's a lot more kids. Like North Brookfield kids are just as, at Quaboag, are like almost the same amount of kids as Warren and West Brookfield. And times have changed, just in general.
Population has changed,
Yeah.
but social constructs have not. I swear to you, because I work in, I think the only town I haven't hit around here has been Wales.
I was just referring to the little fish and the big, like, it's
But it
different.
hasn't changed. These kids are, because you're not just dealing with the adults and the parents and what they're teaching their kids or anything like that. Peer influence, not peer influence. There's another word. It's basically what our kids think other kids think. So peer pressure, that's, kids pushing other kids to do whatever, but we go into these bigger environments and we have kids who have been in classes of 20, 15, whatever, and then they get into a graduating class of, 100 kids? Whatever, between the two towns. I don't know what the graduating numbers are.
It's between like 80 and 100 or 80 and 110.
It's if you sit and work with the kids, because I work with
High school
kids.
has 380, so that would be less than 100 kids
Okay.
in the graduating class.
So I work with kids who go from, like, Ware. They're socially not doing good in Ware, and they transfer to Quaboag. Ware is a bigger school, correct?
I don't know nowadays.
Ware High School?
Where's moving a lot of
was.
kids too,
Right.
yes.
No,
But you would think going from Ware,
Yeah.
which is one type of school, to Quaboag, they would do a lot better, and they don't. It's just such social agony. That's why I want to see it. I want to see a real survey done. I want to see what the kids really think about the idea, and I guarantee some of them will be like super excited about it. Oh my gosh, it's going to be great. But you're going to see a majority of kids here that are like, I
Well,
don't want to go.
I think we hit on something earlier. A lot of the kids that have left and can leave left. They've left. So like if you could talk to the
That
kids.
doesn't matter.
No. I'm saying like.
Because if I bring my kid to Quaboag and they say, oh my God, Mom, I hate it here, too bad. Like, this is what we're doing.
What I was saying is like, it would be worthwhile talking to those kids, the kids here, like all around, because
Right.
times, I could tell you from my personal experience, I think times have changed a little bit from what you're saying, from what you're describing. You have your own experience, that's
Right.
fine, but
Who responds? Who responds to
I'm not talking
these,
about service,
like,
I'm talking about my children.
Who responds to like surveys and stuff that we've done many?
We don't get a lot of responses in general.
Right. Who responds?
Parents that are paying attention.
Higher income.
I don't know, I've never done the income surveys on surveys.
That's part of what I want to know.
But
Because I feel like when I got stuff, when my kids were in school, I was like, oh my God, I don't even know, I don't care, right in the trash. No way do I have time to even worry about what the school's doing, whatever. Because sitting down to do a survey, that's 30 minutes out of my day, I'm not. So I just think that the surveys that we do get done are skewed. So I would like to get a better idea of what everybody thinks, not just that handful that actually reply.
So, I think that's a good point. So what are your thoughts about doing a deep dive into this, and if we feel like we want to move forward, putting it in front of the town, to do a town vote?
As far as regionalization?
As far as like if we decided that we wanted to, either regionalization or tuition, what about?
So for me, based on the research that I did, because we were on our regionalization committee back when I was on, the information that I dug up between Spencer, East Brookfield, Tantascwa, Quaboag, I would never vote to regionalize.
what was the reason?
I would have to get some first of all, the contract.
Yeah.
We were in talks with East Brookfield because East Brookfield was desperately trying to separate from Spencer. they had the lawyers involved, it was a
Right,
thing.
and that's what we would have to do with modern numbers if we were gonna do it. We can't say because 10 years ago, I mean, we have to look at current numbers.
I don't care about the numbers, the contract. So for me, to look at a regionalization contract, I would want
Oh, I see
an
what you're saying,
escape
you're talking about
plan.
lines.
Of course,
Yeah.
Like,
Well, no, that's what, yeah, that would be, have to, yeah.
right, but that's not
But
part of the-
regionalization, if we were gonna go forward with regional, that's a whole nother, like, once you're in a regionalization agreement, you're not really getting out of the regional. It's not. So that's different.
Then I
That's-
would not commit our town.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, in theory, like, if you look across the state, towns that have split apart from, it doesn't happen very often.
Right, but if that's the option
For a
that we
reason,
want to
usually.
take, East Brookfield was desperate.
Right.
It was in the news.
But they couldn't do it on their own, that's why
They couldn't do it, period, because they were looked into money-wise, numbers-wise. They could have been a standalone. They could not get out of the regionalization contract with Spencer. They were locked. They're there for life. They cannot escape. That's my concern, is that if regionalization is a forever deal, I'm not voting for it. I'm not gonna.
even if it meant better opportunities.
You would really
I'm just
have to
asking,
sell,
I'm just-
you would really have to, like, blow my mind. Because again, if it's forever, when something else, when we tie our line to a sinking ship, I don't want North Brookfield to go down with them. We're already in trouble. And I'm concerned that tying in with another region, if it's mismanaged, Wales and Holland had a lot to say about their agreement with Tantascwa. And each one of the individual committee members that I spoke to, I don't remember their names at this point, but their biggest concern was they would never have a vote. Even if they voted and Brookfield voted, if all of those school committee members voted to, like, we're not doing this. Sturbridge won. They had like 52% of the vote. So where's that leave Wales? They got nothing. They had nothing left for their elementary school. They had nothing left for transportation, and their increase to the taxpayers went up every single year, and they got nothing for their school. I'm concerned with that. So,
I think those are valid points. Everybody's entitled to, you know,
those
those are things, if the school if we ever headed down that path, those are all things that would have to be looked at, discussed either way. It's not,
Yeah, but
it's not just a, hey, we like this idea, we're gonna do it tomorrow.
in past conversations, I was shut down every time I started mentioning those things.
So the
I'm
way,
not worried about that.
if-
I'm like,
just so you know, the way full regionalization works is there's some sort of calculation to population
Yep.
and seats on the committee.
yeah,
So the Wales thing, I don't know how to go their configuration, but
yeah,
there would be, like, there has to, like, you set that up in the regional agreement based on population,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think
Makes
we're
me nervous.
getting down too far into the rabbit hole on that part, but. Anybody else have anything they wanted to add or questions?
Matt, can I just want to say one quick thing?
Sure, go ahead, Mike.
In the presentation that Mr. Abrams just did, the number that stuck out to me that, it was there, but nobody really talked about it, was that in fiscal year '27, that we will be, I believe it was at 101.7% of net school spending, which means that as far as the total cost of education goes in the town of North Brookfield, we are, on the FY25 net school spending summary sheet, there are only 7 districts out of the 321 in the state who have a lower percentage of net school spending. And what I've seen this year in particular and last year is that straw is being spun into gold, in the fact that with that low level of funding, we've had no cuts, we've increased, you know. So the one thing that just kind of sticks out to me as a thought is that if the cost of education cannot go lower than that, would any of those things, either regionalization or tuitioning, if it pushes it above the bare minimum, because you can't go, we're not gonna spend more or less than this amount. If the percentage does go higher because of either sped costs or transportation costs or the unforeseen, is the town okay with having to give up funding on the other side and losing any other services because of it? That would be the only question I would say. You know, what's that?
Well, that's why I,
You know what I mean?
that's
Like-
why I asked that though,
Yeah.
about if we do need more money,
Yeah.
because that is going, in 5 years, one of the next 5 years, there probably will be something that happens that requires us to ask for a little bit more than that 2%, like, you know,
You'll always
just being a betting man.
You'll always only have to spend 100%.
No, I
Whatever it
understand.
is. You know what I mean? So, but if
But
it
I
goes
think- I
120,
think
what's that?
we have to also though, like
Yeah.
I said, and we've had discussions several times, and we're seeing across the room here. We have to continue to build up those sources within our budget so that we don't need to go back to the town.
Right.
You're right, there could be a situation that we can't foresee, but, you know, we're in a path right now that won't happen, that shouldn't need to happen. We should be able to continue to support what we have and grow
Right.
with the budget we have, with the revenues that we're building up. So
Yeah, and
that's
I'm
why I
confident.
don't try to put that, I think the mistake that I've even made is that we put this back on the town.
Yeah.
If the school, which is the biggest part of the town's budget, builds up their budget to a place where we can be self-supporting through thick and thin, and still look to build incrementally, that is where we're going to be successful. And to Mr. Baldessari's point, we have been doing that the past year and a half.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I acknowledge that you guys you're doing a great job to keep what we have. What my concern, I've said it a couple times, is the and more. Is like what if we do get to a point where we can start adding.
Well,
like,
we are adding, but
I mean, you know what I'm saying though. If what does that number look like through the years to build back to get those 6th graders instead of thinking about going somewhere else, coming here? Like how much of an investment are we going to need? Like
But I think
there's got to
the
be
other piece
some way to
which-
find that.
Which Mark weaved throughout his presentation tonight is that will be negated if we continue to build back up our enrollment, right? So it's not just about going back to the town to ask for money. If we have
Yeah.
more students in seats, both in the community and in our 2 schools, our funding from the state will go up.
But how do we build back the enrollment without, like, what's the, so I know, like you said, Mr. Rigney did the surveys to see what kids wanted for, like, soccer and stuff like that. And there was a significant amount of 5th and 6th graders that said they were leaving. Like, did we do anything to try to get those kids to stay? Like, did we call the parents, say, hey, we're gonna start soccer? Like, that's where it starts, I think. We have to, like, reach out to these families. And was there any reach out, or?
I don't know to what extent there was reach out. I know that I can say that we do quite a bit of communication with families. We've added more programs that bring families into the school buildings,
Yeah.
which I think is how we capture that conversation.
I just look at it from an overall, I know
Yeah.
school's not a business, but if you're a business and you're losing customers, which we're losing if you lose kids, like, I want to know, how can I keep them? You know what I mean? If they haven't made that decision yet.
But that,
You know.
to that exact statement, what we did this past spring is we talked to kids. We had focus groups that
Yeah.
I ran. We had surveys with kids. We did this similar activity with families and with staff. And I get what your point is, that not all families probably took the survey. They did not. But pretty much all of our staff did, and pretty much all of our students did. And what we tried to really encapsulate was, what do our kids want now? What do they want next year? And what do they want before they graduate? And so we did that work, we continue to do that work, and we're going to start this school year with some new things in place to support some of that. I know it's getting late, I said this
Yeah,
before, I just wanted, you know,
well, I
I
appreciate it.
want that to be said out loud again. Can I ask a question of the committee?
Sure.
Do we have an idea for a meeting to, I know we typically do a special meeting to interview new members of the committee?
Yes.
There's a date for that?
So I set a
That's
date.
not on the agenda, but I figured it's
Fine.
time.
I set a date of the 4th for anybody
Yes.
interested to get
I
back to
sent
me.
that out today.
And I wanted to talk to the committee about scheduling a follow-up meeting after that, knowing that the 7th is Labor Day and that's a Monday after, so we won't be able to meet on Labor Day. So what is it? And I just want to make sure we do it before the 30 days. Get an appointment to the select board before.
So
the
you're
30
looking
days.
for that same week?
Yeah, we probably, so I'm just trying to do I had the date written down, what a 30th day would be.
I could do, that same week, I could do either Tuesday or Thursday.
I can do either of
If
those.
if we can do Tuesday, let's do the earliest, if Mr. McCormick's open and the building's available, or we can have a space somewhere.
So that would be
Tuesday,
Tuesday
September
the 8th. Tuesday the 8th?
Yeah, if you can do that, then we're locked in.
Yeah.
And I'll let anybody know who's interested.
At the regular time?
Yeah, let's do that. 6 o'clock's good for you, Mr. McCormick?
That's fine. So that's a special meeting for,
Filling the open seat.
Yep.
So where would we leaving this conversation? Are we just tabling it for now, or?
I mean, I don't know, I don't think there's really a lot to,
no, my understanding was it was just a discussion to understand where each of us was at.
I mean, I didn't have.
I would love for you guys to continue with that school.
I'm there regularly. Yep.
Okay.
I know it has a lot, but
That's a lot.
I.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
that's
think
not
we-
enough for me. It's the fire
Right.
within that I'm concerned with sparking. If we spark it, it'll go.
I think I have to agree with Michelle, I want to spend our energy and efforts this year
Plus-
into building what's here and growing what's here and supporting what's here.
Right, and the idea that we're going to send them, you know, starting next year, that's not realistic. Because the process alone, we can have those things started here. Just in that processing time. The conversations, the voting, the this, the that, da-da-da. It's gonna be 3 to 4 years before we get kids in there. So in 3 to 4 years, what can we do
So
here?
with a tuition agreement, you could get them in next year. So they could have football and soccer.
And we can still run our own K through 6 school too, so like,
Right.
that's an option too. But anyway, I think we're getting, like Tim said, we're getting late in the night here, and I think if you guys are okay with me, I'll reach back out to the superintendent, let him know that we discussed it, he can watch it on, you know, and then,
And if anybody would like to send me some of the highlight differences between the tuition agreements, because those were not part of my experience the last time I was on school committee. So the differences between tuition agreements and
I can send you what I'll
That's
send you
fine.
what we looked at last year.
Yeah.
It should all be on the shared drive. I had sent it to Danielle, I think she attached it as like a one huge document.
Okay.
But, yeah, I can send it to you. If anybody doesn't have anything else, Tim, do you have anything else, Mr. McCormick?
No.
Since you're here, Mike, have anything else?
No.
You stayed the whole night.
Yeah, I didn't.
All right, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn this evening's meeting.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.